And Emily, do you tell me when you would like me to start the meeting? I'm perfectly happy to wait for Emily.
Okay, it's still getting the YouTube. Oh, it's just barely kicking in. So we can give it another minute. Maybe let's wait 2 minutes. At 4:03 we can start. Oh, here's Emily now.
Good.
Hello. Long time no see. Are we live? Good.
Yes.
Okay, so Garish, Garish, you're here. I thought you might be a little bit late. We know Steve's going to be a little bit late. Makeda is going to be a little bit late. That gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We are at a quorum. Okay.
Emily, I may end up getting into a dead zone and leaving the meeting early is what I was trying to say.
Checked email in between meetings. That's fine. We're still at a quorum, even if you get into a dead zone, and I hope that you don't and you drive safe. So perfect. Okay, so with that, we will call our regular meeting of the Planning Commission to order and begin with citizens to be heard. Is there anybody here in the Zoom call who would like to make a comment in citizens to be heard? Or if you are on YouTube, you're welcome to join. The agenda has the Zoom login details. All right, not seeing anybody who's here to make a comment. We'll move on to ex parte communications and disclosures. Do any commissioners?
I had a quick comment. I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, could you state your name into the record and then you're welcome to make your comment.
Yeah, this is Reed Pendleton. I submitted an email earlier today with a bunch of comments. I'm on the road, so I don't have much time, but I just wanted to see if my email made it through to everybody.
I'm sorry, Reed, it did not. I was out of the office this afternoon. I will make sure it gets to everyone. I can send it to everyone as part of, I'm sorry, Reed, I can send it to everyone now, but they have not had a chance to read it yet.
Okay, I'll just make a quick few points. It's mainly about the discussion today regarding the redevelopment and expansions of overnight accommodations. Just quickly, I wanted to stress that I think the discussion should be split up into a couple different sections. One being lodging establishments, like hotels, motels, condos, those kinds of things. And then a separate conversation around campgrounds. They're completely different style accommodations and user groups. And I know in the original moratorium development standards, it was really confusing trying to overlap the two. So I think it'd be easier for everybody if maybe that was kind of how the discussion went. I know there's some specific things that are being asked for some redevelopment. And I can't remember everything in my email, unfortunately, but one thing I pointed out in my email is I think we need to, maybe as a county and as planning department, I think we need to kind of try to define what exactly glamping is. Glamping sites really aren't defined anywhere. And right now I think they can build as big of a glamping site as they really want. And I don't think that's really fair to the rest of us that are in the camping, industry. We're all regulated by, development standards, ANSI, and, we can't, everything else is regulated, but now there's this new glamping thing going on. You can have a 2 or 3 bedroom, glamping tent with, a little kitchen and a full bathroom and all that kind of stuff. So maybe glamping shouldn't be part of a campground. I don't know. I think that needs to be kind of fleshed out and decided how that needs to be addressed. For instance, a redevelopment of a tent site and a campground to a glamping tent site is a massive change, as far as accommodations is concerned. And so I think we need to look at how upgrading or, improving a very low end site into a luxurious, accommodation or lodging site, really, how that changes the scope of somebody's existing development, and what they should do or shouldn't do, coming into standards with all the new development standards that we came up with last, in 2019. Mainly, I just want to make sure that right now everything in town, pretty much everybody's been bought out by out-of-state people, from my knowledge. And I know there's one development under contract right now, which may be part of why this discussion is coming up. And there might be a change on how their sites are actually sold, and if they're going to come in and change a bunch of RV sites into lodging cabins and, to maximize their income, I think that's a change of user group and, increased amenities. And so, I think that just needs to be, discussed thoroughly. And I do think it's completely different than a hotel or a motel or somebody else changing, the scope of their rooms and stuff. So I just wanted to encourage the, planning commission, county commission, everybody involved with this to really break those two groups apart. And then, let's work through each section of it and make sure that we do it the right way the first time. So hopefully you guys get to see my email. It's a little bit more detailed. And I'll try to listen to the meeting and see what you guys come up with. Thanks.
Thank you, Reed. I just want to clarify the OAO redevelopment discussion that's on the agenda today is an update of a discussion that happened at the county council or the county commission, and the county commission requested to take that issue to a workshop where it could be discussed in more detail. So your comments are very timely, and I will make sure your email gets to all the planning commission and county commission members. And since we are early in this discussion, even though the planning commissioners haven't had a chance to see your email yet, they will be able to see that before this discussion really goes deeper. The scope of what we'll be talking about today is really just a quick update from the county commission, and there will be more in-depth discussions at future meetings.
Okay, I didn't realize that's what was happening. I just saw it on the agenda, so.
Oh yeah, no problem, and thank you. I did see your email, and I'll make sure that gets out to everyone, and they will definitely have time to consider it before the more in-depth discussions.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, is there anybody else who would like to make a comment for citizens to be heard? With that, we'll move on to ex parte communications and disclosures. So are there any planning commissioners who have any disclosures to make or any ex parte communications to disclose? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to approval of meeting minutes from April 12th and April 26th. Are there any comments or discussions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
Can I move to approve both sets of minutes at one time?
I think so, yes.
I so move.
All right, a motion to approve both sets of minutes on our agenda. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, motion by OB, seconded by Garish. Any discussion? If not, we'll call the question. All in favor of approving both the April 12th and April 26th minutes? By OB, seconded by
Aye.
Garish. Raise your hand. Aye by Garish.
Aye.
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor and 2 absent. So those are approved. Wonderful. Moving on to County Commission action items report.
Okay, so you guys were interested in the OAO redevelopment and extension. And as Abby just mentioned, there was a lengthy discussion. I don't know if you want to hear the details of that discussion. I have a little bulleted paper here, but it was basically tabled to have a workshop to flesh out the new, those details once the new planning and zoning director and associate planner were put into place. So that's basically where we sit with that. And speaking of that, I'll kind of give you a quick update on that. John Gunther. Is that how you say his name, Abby? Am I saying that correctly?
I'm not sure. I've seen it written. but I haven't spoken with him yet.
Looks like Mallory's on the
Sorry.
call. Maybe Mallory could correct
Oh,
us.
great, Mallory.
I'm not sure myself, but that's certainly how I've been pronouncing it. So I can share with you all if I'm wrong.
So his first day is going to be Wednesday. And then we do have a new code enforcement officer, Josh Green. He'll be starting June 1st. They've also posted for the Planner 1 position, which is in essence the PZ administrative assistant job, modified a little bit to include some technical planning components. And that position will closes on Friday, May 28th. So I don't know if you guys want to know more, any of those details of that discussion, or if you just want me to move on. It's been a while. Like when that came up today, I basically had to ask Mallory for help because I'm like, what do they want to know? And I just forgot it was like a couple meetings ago. I have a lot of meetings every week. Sorry.
Well,
So
I know.
details begin. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I think I turned into that county commission meeting, but now I'm challenging myself. So at the time that we were going through the OAO planning process, we did sort of put on hold how to deal with redevelopment. So I'm glad to see us returning to this. One of the areas that I had expressed some thoughts and concerns around that got tabled was how we assess community value when it comes to both new and potentially redevelopment or expansion of OAO projects. Because for new projects, it's a little bit easier for us to make that assessment because it's sort of one option, it doesn't exist, the other one it does, and there's some middle, right, what that delta is. For redevelopment and potential expansion, in addition to how much of the project should be governed by the standards of the OAO ordinance in our code, I'm also just curious to think about where we want to place those trade-offs, you know? So for an existing development, is upgrading an outdated hotel, for example, is that something that the county commission would consider an update? Or potentially that could even be community harm because it could increase the property values of surrounding areas, which could further price people out of the town. And I'm not one to make that assessment. Right. I think we need to be having a very critical conversation about what community value means. So I hope as the county commission takes that into further discussion as we take it up, that's a particular point of.
Right. Mallory, can I ask you, I mean, I have no idea, during those workshops, I mean, in this case, would it be prudent to have the planning commission invited to that workshop? I'm just asking you a question. I don't know if you know. I really don't know.
I think that would be helpful. And I believe, Emily, you and the other planning commissioners have been a part of other workshops.
Okay, great.
Maybe it's just a matter of breaking it down of what decisions need to be made at which step or which steps, and seeing if there's an initial workshop where they're getting kind of input and having this conversation, or if it's you know, kind of swapped. And I imagine it will be a few workshops and that there will be varying opportunities, but that the planning commission is pretty critical to all of it.
Okay, great. Okay,
I would love to recommend, even if the full body doesn't participate, that the planning commission appoint maybe 2 people to attend, maybe at least one of those 2 being a commissioner who is involved in the original scoping of the OAO updates to the land use code. So that's something maybe you could take back to the commission or back to Mary and get their thoughts on it. But maybe during today's meeting, we might preemptively select that subcommittee so that if it is something that the county commission wanted to move forward with, those people could go and participate and bring back updates as well to the larger body. How do you feel about that, Trish?
I think that sounds great. Just jotting down a little note here. All right, I like that.
Is there anyone from the planning commission who would be particularly interested in attending those if the county commission was open to our participation in that way this early? OB, okay. And Josie?
Good.
Would anyone
Great.
else feel particularly left out? Then I'm moved to appoint a subcommittee to the OAO workshops pending
Okay,
county
cool.
commission approval.
Okay,
The-
that sounds great.
The other thing is I understand the workshops are open to anybody.
The workshops are open to listen in, but
Too.
I'd
Right.
particularly like, if the county commission is open to it, I'd particularly like to appoint members of the planning commission to participate in a participatory sense. So I'm going to put a motion on the table. I'd love to appoint this subcommittee, and that way, if the county commission wants to move forward, we can just keep the ball rolling. So I move to appoint OB and Josie to a subcommittee to assist the planning commission to the extent the county commission is open in their workshops regarding OAO expansion and redevelopment. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Emily.
Okay, Garish, I think Rick beat you by a hair. So motion by Emily, seconded by Rick. All in favor?
I was gonna have a little discussion, but I'll vote in favor.
Oh, I'm sorry, Garish. I was preemptive there. Well, I won't call the results of the vote if you'd like to make a comment, and then we can revisit.
Well, just in the past, where we've had joint planning commission workshops with the, at that time, in the county council, they were advertised as joint meetings. I don't know if unless Trish has some other information about why the planning commission wouldn't be a participant, I think we could just assume that it would be the same. That would be a joint meeting, joint workshop between the planning commission and the county commission.
It does sound like Trish is going to talk to Mary and talk to the larger commission about that. But I think with this, I honestly, just with the timing of all these meetings, if the county commission moves forward with it, I just don't want to be a blocker of having to wait until our next meeting. So I fully agree.
And I say having two people designated that would be more critical than the rest of us on the planning commission that could attend the workshop and have their schedules considered during the scheduling would be a good thing. So I'm in favor of your motion and I'm ready to vote.
Okay, so we'll vote once more. Thank you, Garish. I think those are worthwhile comments and clarifications. So I appreciate you interjecting. So all in favor of OB and Josie representing the planning commission, if this is how the county commission chooses to move forward, say aye. Garish
Aye.
said aye. Awesome. So unanimous. Thank you. Lovely. Any other questions or comments related to the county commission action items report? Okay.
Trisha, I'm sorry, I had to mute for a second. Unmute. Thank you.
I'm like, I'm talking away, but nobody's responding. Anyway, so the other thing that you wanted to know about was the Moab and Spanish Valley Regional Transportation Plan. That was an action item at our last commission. We moved to adopt the resolution indicating support for that that regional transportation plan. And that did pass unanimously. I believe, but I did want to note one of the pieces that was brought up, obviously, the bypass was discussed in one of the earlier drafts of that transportation plan, but noted that the bypass had been removed from the current proposal. So that was obviously a big piece that both the council and the commission had talked about, and that was removed. And then you guys just wanted a quick update. I'm just trying to think of anything that kind of stands out. The only thing I can think of that might be of interest to you, I went to Grand Water and Sewer meeting, and the soil moisture content in the soil is still extremely low, which means we're just not going to get the runoff that we should be getting. I think the meeting prior to that it was 6%, and this last meeting that I went to was 14%. So it'd come up a little bit, and the lake was a third, or Kins Lake is a third of what it was this time last year. So just so you guys kind of have a feel for what's going on the drought front. And then as usual, I've been doing a lot of work with Thompson, and we're going to hear more about that tonight. And again, just really concerned about water in that community. So, but you'll hear more about that tonight. But again, I think it's that microscopic look at our community also. I always say that, I know. I'm always like this scared individual. So that's it for me.
Yeah, it's a scary year. It's a scary year. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Tricia. Any other questions or comments related to the county commission updates, state of the state, etc.? Okay, we'll move on to the Spanish Valley Survey, and OB, I will turn the meeting over to you for this.
Let's see. Am I being able to share the screen? It says host has disabled participant screen.
Oh, sorry, Obi, I can
That's
give
good.
you, I can make you co-host, so you should be able to share the screen now, or if
Great.
you'd like, I can share the screen and do updates. Just let me know what you prefer.
If you want to share the screen, that's great. And do updates, huh? That's great.
Updates as we go through, yeah. Sorry, give me just a second to orient myself here, okay. All right, is everyone seeing the draft of the survey? Sorry, is everyone seeing that, the survey
Yes.
draft?
Yep, it's sharing well.
All right. So Obi, if you want to lead the conversation, I do have, as we go through, I have some specific questions on some of the numbered items as well. So aside from just general feedback.
Why don't we go ahead and move down to the first questions?
Okay. Yeah. So these maps are Google Map and the county GIS map. And so I think we can link to those in a way that people can zoom in on and get a better idea.
And actually on the first two questions, I was going to say, Abby actually went ahead and made the changes that we suggested. I think they were all great. She changed these first couple of questions to give us a bit more information. I've read them over. They looked good to me. I don't know how they look to other people, but we were interested. Some people were interested in whether people were working, whether they were renting, etc. And question two, I think, gets at most of what people wanted, but people may have suggestions.
Yeah. So my only questions for one or two are there any, is there anything missing from this list? And if there's nothing to say right now, but something comes up later, I'm sure there's time to incorporate that before this is.
So this is Rick. I have one suggestion.
Yes.
So in question one, it says circle. And question two, it says check.
Oh,
Why don't we pick one?
yep.
My guess is this thing is probably going out as one of those surveys where you push buttons or something. Is that probably right?
Yeah, I think so. So they might all change to click
Yeah.
the box. Mm-hmm.
So just so I'm on the same page, because I had to miss last week, are we, for the sake of this, assuming people will define define Spanish Valley as anything south of the Moab City line? I mean, are we comfortable with that? How useful is it to differentiate between Grand County residents in or not in Spanish Valley if it's that broad?
I think we could, I think it would, I have the definition of like the Highway 191 it says this, I have a quick definition up here. The survey focuses on the area of Spanish Valley between the southern boundary of Moab and the southern boundary of Grand County. Do you think that illustrates enough, or we should give a little more context by what we mean about Spanish Valley?
Well, I guess I just, I mean, basically that's anyone who doesn't live in Castle Valley, Thompson, or the city of Moab is pretty much going to be in that pocket. So I just wonder, I'm just not overly concerned about my concerns with this one, but it just, do we want to get more specific if we're asking people to cognitively differentiate between their, like, is it enough just to say, are you a Grand County resident, San Juan County resident? None of the above.
I think there was interest in seeing differentiating between people who live in Spanish Valley and people who live in pretty much Moab City or Castle Valley is the comparison.
Okay,
Which is,
just as long as I know that I'm operating off the same mental map as everyone else, I'm fine with that.
I think you're right. I think Trish might tell us that people are interested in whether they are part of Spanish Valley or other parts, because the plan is going to affect their neighborhood, I think.
okay. All right, I can continue on. Question 3, I'm looking to see if we can get a map or some better way, because my concern with question 3 is it's just a really open-ended question and it might be hard to compile that data. But I also think it would be interesting to hear what people, what people consider to be the neighborhoods out there. So if there's any suggestions for how to better organize that, let me know.
My thought is, Abby, that I like the blank space answer rather than a map on this one. But because I think people will be able to say, well, I live in blah, 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 and describe their neighborhood if they want to do so.
Okay. And then question 4, I didn't change much, except I think I added a little bit of the definition of the highway corridor. That's the definition I have, is that it's pretty much just the highway commercial zones along the highway and then any adjacent commercial zones behind them. But if there's a different way to define the highway corridor, let me know. And then I added a bunch more options to the list just by going through the use table and making sure that all of the uses that are in the use table were not exactly as specific as it is in the use table, but at least all the broad uses that are in the use table were on this list as well. Anything else that's missing, or any feedback on the definition of the Highway 191 corridor? So question 5 is pretty much the same, just areas outside the Highway 191 corridor. The only difference is neighborhood commercial nodes is an option on this one and was not an option for the commercial corridor. But otherwise, it's the same list.
I have a comment about the maps.
Yeah.
So when I reviewed the map, and maybe it's because I was using my phone, but I didn't see a legend that showed what, especially for the zoning map of Spanish Valley, what the different colors represented. So it would be good to somehow delineate the various zones on the map so that people know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking either there could be, this is just a screenshot of the county GIS map where, it's very interactive.
Correct.
And it's a legend, you can see the parcels. Do you think it would be better to have something like this that's a screenshot but better labeled, or just a link to the county GIS map? Or I mean, I guess it could be both.
I think a screenshot with labels would be good.
Okay, yeah, I think that's good. It can,
I think a link would be useful also because I think this is a tool that's available online that a lot of people might not know about. That is a really great education piece for people.
okay, I mean, I think it would be very doable to have both a screenshot for people that don't want to mess with it, but a link for anyone who wants to see that resource or get more in depth. Yeah, good feedback. And then this one is just, yeah, like a screenshot off Google Maps. And I couldn't figure out how to, it just tags like random, like the Wingate and the Scenic View Inn and Old Spanish Trail Arena. And those aren't like carefully chosen landmarks or anything. So that I think that maybe we can have this map that has the parcels and then also a link to Google Map or something else if that helps anyone visualize it better.
We should be able to
And-
just embed the satellite actual Google Maps
Yeah.
thing zoomed out to the, yeah.
And Abby, I wonder if it would be helpful on one of those maps to have, and it may already be there, but maybe very dark lined what the southern boundary of Moab is, to help people define that.
Mhm. Okay. All right, so I think we're back at question 6, which on this one, I don't know. Let me know what you'd like to see. If you think it'd be better to suggest certain intersections or certain areas that could be potential commercial nodes, or just leaving it open for people to say like where they think would make sense. I didn't really have the time to go super in depth on this question, but I think it would be helpful on one hand to give some like intersections or areas that could be developed into commercial nodes and have people choose from them. But I think it could also be helpful to have people suggest. So let me know any feedback on that one.
Aren't this to some extent laid out, I want to say in the transportation study? Weren't there some nodes listed there? I know I've seen a list recently and I'm thinking that might be where it is, or maybe it was the economic diversification. I can't remember, but there's a document or multiple documents floating around with some existing nodes, and we might just borrow from what exists.
Yes, and I feel the same way. Like I've seen some floating around, but I wasn't able to find anything to list on here, but we can reach out to look at the transportation plan and reach out to economic development. Yes, I would much rather use an existing list than try to create one. Okay. And for question 7, I did include the master plan at the end of the survey in the packet. I would include a link to it because there are so many maps and trails identified. It was hard to compress. I didn't have a map that compressed them all into one.
And Abby, I think what's lacking on these trail maps, and I was involved in developing them years ago, is some landmarks. I mean, it's really difficult to see what's what. What would really be great is if every trail that's identified there could be labeled somehow, with the name. But at a minimum, if the maps could at least have a few landmarks like major streets, maybe golf course, developments that have names so that people can find themselves. Because some of the names for those trails, it's just a name and it really doesn't say anything about where they are. And if people aren't familiar with the name, they might not be able to participate very effectively.
Okay, that's a good suggestion.
What is our current hope as far as timeline to get this out, and what sort of effect might this have, this particular question, on that timeline? Like, I wonder if there's a way to balance. I'd love to get this out in circulation as soon as possible, I guess, is where I bias towards. And if we think that would be pretty easy to put together, then I think it's great. Otherwise,
Well, and it seems like the maps themselves have a lot of landmarks. It's more that like super south one that is kind of in this hard to define region, but everything else seems like it does have some landmarks that are identifiable. I'm not sure what more should be done.
Abby, I
Well, I
did have
did-
a, oh,
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Gary. Go ahead, Gary.
Josie, I was trying to find my neighborhood on one of the maps that should be included, and there were no streets. So maybe we're looking at two different maps, but if you look at map number 2 or map number 3, I didn't see very many landmarks. I saw lots of streets, but they weren't even named. And what I'm suggesting is if the county GIS shop could improve these, not go through a lot of effort, but just improve them, just to make them a little more understandable, by adding some more detailed names of things. They might not want to put names on every one of the trails that are identified, but at least if people could hone in a little better as to what's what, so they know which map they're on, and they can find out if their trail is included on the list or not, then that would provide us better input, I think. And,
Okay.
and maybe the GIS shop can do this. I know Jeff Freedy had a big hand in drafting these maps back when the county trails plan was put together. But I think maybe the GIS shop could do it, or maybe we could get Jeff to help them
I
with a
can
little bit
reach
more.
out to Frank, who's the county GIS person, and get an idea from him if these are, easy, quick things to make, or more involved than that.
That'll be great. Thank you.
And Abby, I had a question when I was looking at the document. It has this thing called approved or unsigned and then pending. Is that important, and I don't know what it means?
I know what it means.
Oh, thanks, Garrett.
The ones that are approved are ones that are official Grand County trails. And the ones that are pending, a lot of those that were pending probably are part of the Grand County Trail system now. So I don't know when the map was last updated. And so there are a number of other ones that probably would be good to include in the trails plan. The trails mix might take that up at some point in time, because Trail Mix basically was in charge of getting this information put together in the first place. But there are some trails that are not approved yet that are considered pending, that have been identified by people either in their neighborhood or for whatever reason, but they, at the time that the Grand County Trails plan was approved, they were not part of it.
Okay. That, as far as I know, that's the most, I reached out to Active Trails and Transportation to get this map. And so I think it is the most recent version. That there could definitely be things on there that are out of date. But I think that is the most recent official version. But if nothing else, I can at least define that designation. Is there anything missing from questions from question 8 as far as transportation improvements.
I find it interesting this is framed around use versus what you would like to see. There are, for example, residents of Spanish Valley whose children may no longer be of school age, but may enjoy, well, I should say, maybe they don't make use of the bike trails, but I mean, sorry, Abby, it looked like you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I see what you're saying is just because you maybe aren't using a bike trail doesn't mean you would
Bus service.
want a bike trail or a bus service. Yeah. So maybe just, do any other planning commissioners have thoughts on that? Because I can definitely just change it to what type of
Yeah.
transportation improvements would you like to see?
I kind of like that also. Something, yeah, you'd like to see is great.
Okay. Okay, then I guess question 9 is any feedback on question 9?
Sorry, this is more of a formatting thing. In some places we have 5 options, in some places we have 4. I think for the sake of continuity, it's sort of best practice to just make it consistent so that as people are going through, they're not having to think about it. So to the extent that we can get to that outcome, I'd like to see us be consistent.
Okay. Make note of that.
Like if we dropped 9 down to 4 options and reformatted 9, 10, 11 in a similar way, I'd think you'd get it wouldn't drastically affect the outcome, but it'd be easier for people to parse.
Yeah, I think that's a good note. Okay. So yeah, so formatting those 3 as more similar, but any feedback on questions 10 or 11 about ATV noise or illegal camping?
Yeah, I just want to double up on that. Like I get the point of showing the different examples in 11, but honestly, people may project, but they don't actually know. I think just knowing, as we're asking people their neighborhoods, kind of where they generally are, right? Having a problem with illegal camping in your neighborhood. Yes, very serious problems. Yes, there are some problems, etc. I mean,
okay,
that would be my input. I'm fine to be wrong, but I do think having it be consistent and not projecting probably gets us cleaner responses that we can more easily build policy off of.
Yeah, I definitely see a point. I should say that a lot of people who contact our office with code complaints, sometimes I think you can differentiate, but we do kind of get 2 different tracks of complaints of like, this person has, my neighbor has RVs, different RVs parked in that driveway every weekend versus I can see that this guy is living in there. He's got the power hookup, he's got the cord extended out to his RV. So I think they are, and I guess, so anyway, I think there is some differentiation, but then of course that is a lot of projection. A lot of time people don't know exactly. My thought in separating those ideas was that there has been, for some of you who are on the planning commission for a while, I mean, it was at one point discussed of being able to allow RVs as like a seasonal ADU at a residence if you had proper hookups. And so I guess there's potential to maybe have that discussion again, because that RVs are just such a widely used option. But I don't think there's any discussion of, well, yes, let's allow everyone to have a mini RV park with overnight rentals in their driveways. But I don't know if this question is really getting at it. Maybe I think
No, I see your point, but let me make a recommendation in that case. Like if we think this is something that could be useful for policy purposes, then I would want to know, do you perceive there to be a problem? So following the format of question 10, and then saying what forms of illegal camping do you see in your neighborhood of Spanish Valley? And then if people say, you know, there's a big problem. I mean, there's two ways of looking at it. Either you can ask about each particular use. Is illegal camping tourists a big problem? Yes, somewhat, not at all. Or RVs, long-term RVs a big problem? Yes, no, somewhat, not at all. Because then you could get to the outcome of, wow, people who see this don't tend to think it's a problem. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is you ask in general if it's a problem, with, I guess, the goal of understanding if it's something we should be even considering as a governance priority, and then look at what types of uses people see. So, people who say that it's a problem tend to be the people who see that they have tourists illegally camping in their area. But just this one as its own, I think sort of conflates the two. So I could see the reason why we might want to grab it. I just would recommend a slightly altered approach.
Yeah, I think that's great. So yeah, reformatting this question to be the same format about just illegal camping in general, and then could add a follow-up question, or even in the like policy question about, would you like to see a path for legal RV living in neighborhoods with, Okay, sounds good. Yeah, and I think that would produce more useful information. Okay. All right, I guess any other thoughts on that before we move to question 12?
My only one had been, if you had kept it in the same form, I would have said check all that apply. Because you could not like camping by tourists or by or RVs that were by kind of permanent. So, but I think if we go this other route, that's irrelevant.
Okay.
On 12 though, I might suggest spelling out Spanish Valley, only because we don't use SV at other times, but.
Yes, thank you. And I do appreciate help on that kind of thing, on typos or formatting, because it's always helpful to have other pairs of eyes on that kind of thing. So is there anything on that list that is missing?
I had one comment on question 12, and that was that for item C, I'm not sure that those are necessarily the same thing. I think for some people, the meaning of rural environment could be, you know, ample space to drive recreational vehicles around.
That makes sense.
When I go to.
Okay. So those are 4 of the options that have come up. I'm sure as far as water conservation measures, there are other options. So if there's anything that is missing, that would be an option that would be important to include.
And I would maybe include other as an option so that people can fill in the blank.
Yeah, and that's been something we've been doing pretty consistently throughout this survey as well.
How do we feel about option A being a little bit jargony? Do we think that's easily interpretable by people who aren't, you know, well-versed in water policy? Or does anyone have any suggestions? I don't, but it does feel a little jargony to me. So I didn't know if someone else might have an idea.
Only if this is minor, I guess one could say drinking water. Makes it a little less nerdy in case somebody has a problem with that word.
It's the more commonly used term. Maybe another sentence to say, if drinking water is not available, new development wouldn't be permitted.
Right. Yeah, because the way it's phrased, it's kind of like considering, and so it's jargony, but there's not really a quantifiable measure.
Good point.
I mean, I understand the difference between, for example, gray water or recaptured water versus drinking water, but like, can we just say water? Do we need to add the extra word?
That's a good point.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's also kind of water sources, right? Like there's the aquifer source, which is the culinary water. And then there's a different source, which is a lot of the ag water, which is like the more shallow, very like slightly more salty sources. Is that part of this wording?
Yeah, I mean, basically the Valley Fill Aquifer is not really great for drinking. And the Glen Canyon Aquifer is good, but maybe I'm kind of favoring at this point just using water. That it means that there's some kind of water shortage that would, would then force maybe you to not approve new development. So I might actually just go back to water, or not go back to it, but put water in there. Because other stuff is maybe getting technical.
I like this. My mother would understand this question. My mother doesn't watch our recordings. Otherwise, I wouldn't say that, but cool. Awesome.
Hi, everyone. Just for the record, it's 4:52 and Steve Evers is on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve Evers. Welcome.
Okay.
Steve, since you're joining us late, any comments, before question 13 that you had in your notes from reviewing the packet?
Yeah, just give me 1 second here to get him the notes I took on this survey.
Okay, so, and then that last question is just asking people if there's anything that we've missed. And I think from the discussions we've had on the Planning Commission, I don't think we're missing any questions that planning commissioners feel like should be addressed, but if there is anything missing, we can make sure to get that added in.
Oh, one comment I had, and so I apologize if this was already discussed, and maybe this could be in the other. I was thinking maybe it'd be beneficial to have like a support no change, or sorry, support no, either.
Oh, no water conservation measures.
Yeah, not that would likely be the way we go, but I think it could be a good way to measure if there's going to be a lot of opposition to putting anything into place.
Yeah, I think that's good to have that option.
Are there other places in the survey you think that could be useful, Steve? I mean, I want to make sure that, I'm trying to say this delicately, but the nature of discourse at the moment is if people read a bias through a survey, they may be less likely to take it. And I would really like to avoid that perception, certainly the reality, but also avoid that perception. And when we do go through and review the results of this, when it comes to our further discussions.
No, I think that's fair. I didn't have anything in my notes, so.
Yeah, but I think that would definitely be useful, especially maybe when things are in a very close to final form, to have everyone read it or to give it out to people who might be coming from a different place ideologically, to read through and see if there's anything that could be, any language that could be made more neutral or more inclusive, or any options that were left off.
It flipped by too quickly, but the transportation one, I guess you could have an answer that said none of the above.
Mm-hmm.
And then other, because somebody might feel, well, I guess I have to check one of these.
Yeah, good point. Okay. All right. So now we're looking at the more kind of policy specific questions. And I'm especially interested if there's any feedback on how these are described, or if there's anything that could be added or removed from the description that would give a, concise explanation of these policies. The links are all links to the actual wording in the land use code. So, if anyone is interested, if anyone sees this and would like to see more, it takes them right to that wording.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, I had one thought with question 2, is whether we wanted to clarify anything that has been clarified in recent weeks about ownership versus occupancy, whether that's worth clarifying in this question.
As far as I know, the appeals have not yet, there hasn't been rulings on the appeals yet. And so as far as I know, we don't have more answers. I think it's very likely by the time this survey is live that there will be some more information to include. And so I'll just make note to keep an eye on that.
So with another recent controversy, question 1, we use the term agricultural land against the PUD, and terminology was of particular sensitivity when we were even discussing that as a body. For example, open space as a specific term versus open space as a descriptive term, agricultural land here as an open specific term versus not.
The reason I used agricultural land is because that's how it is. That's how it's defined in the PUD description in the land use code. But it is a bit confusing because it was created as a tool to preserve agricultural land, but when you preserve a large lot, there's no requirement that you keep it agricultural. You could preserve a large lot that you just have open. Wouldn't necessarily have to have a farm on it. So maybe that is a good update to make.
Well, I was looking at it earlier, and that's one description, but then it's also like that's not all encompassing. Anyway, I don't think it needs to be the end of the world, but I would just.
No, I think maybe just saying undeveloped land.
I think that's fair. I think that's the right approach.
Yeah, because that it is the terminology, especially with PUD, is important. I mean, with everything, but.
I will say on question 1 there, I had to go through and read it, if I'm being honest, 3 times. And I have some familiarity with it. I'm kind of more of a concrete person. So maybe if there's a way to use an example, I understand and acknowledge that's it makes this quite cumbersome. But I'm wondering, and we might have touched on this on a previous meeting, but whatever format this survey's given to the public in, like, are there going to be ways that we can have like a hover over link that has a specific word defined, and if that is the case, maybe there's a way that we can put in like a little hover over example to make it more tangible. I think even just having a pretty simple diagram that's like, here's a 5-acre plot of land. If you developed it with a traditional subdivision in RR, you'd have 5 1-acre parcels. If you developed it with a PUD in an RR zone, you'd have 4 small parcels, 1 big parcel. So I think that really does help explain that. And I think that'd be a pretty easy diagram to come up with. And I also had reached out. I had an informal. I mentioned it to the GIS person about making a map that has the PUDs labeled in it, but I need to follow up with him to see the level of
difficulty that would be, because for various reasons, it would be useful to have the PUDs somehow identified in the county GIS resources. And that could also help people get a better idea of where PUDs are. But I'll include that when we talk to Frank about what GIS resources could be available.
Abby, I'm popping some suggested text in that may be overly simplified for this particular case, but I'm always keen to simplify where possible, and I wonder if anyone would be open to this. Again, the people who will be weighing in, I think we might assume might have some familiarity, or else they would select option A, but just to be safe. You know, again, if we're trying to gauge interest and not the general, policy wonkiness of the underlying region.
Okay, so yeah, we can look at a way to clear that up. Trisha also did mention that we do another Citizens to be Heard at about 5, but I think we're close enough to the end of this survey that if anyone is in the Zoom for Citizens to be Heard, we will do that as soon as we're done with this discussion.
Thank you, Abby. I appreciate you calling that out, and Trisha for calling that out. Generally speaking, we try to keep to those times, but we don't let them, dictate the schedule to the minute. So let's see if we can wrap this up by 5:15, and then we'll turn over into our next part of our agenda.
So any other comments on question 1 and 2 before looking at the next section? Okay. I don't know why this is still highlighted. I also, I feel like this one gets pretty, goes down a rabbit hole pretty quickly for bed and breakfast. Because there's not a great easy option of an alternative to a legal non-conforming use. So maybe we can sit with that, and if that question seems,
I think these are good as options. I'm trying to think if any wording would because I'm trying to think, okay, the difference between B and C is this, that, and this and that, because there's kind of a lot of moving parts. But I think my understanding of those 3 is that those do seem like the 3 options. I do think it's on the right track.
They currently, in B, are we trying to suggest an openness to expansion and redevelopment, which right now, no OAO can, so.
Well, that's part of the bigger discussion on OAO expansion and redevelopment. And so, but just looking at what the alternatives are to a legal non-conforming use, it's either it becomes an OAO overlay that's just on a residential parcel, or B&Bs are a by right use again, meaning that any it's return to a residential zone use, which I don't know if there's support for that. I know this has been discussed a lot, and that's not where things have landed in the past. But
we could frame this as, do you think B&Bs should be allowed to operate in Grand County? Yes, by anyone. Yes, if they're in an OAO. Yes, but they can expand, or no, I don't, or some other option, and just simplify it. Again, I'm trying to get to I don't know that we need to, at this level in the survey, query the public for the very, very specific policy solutions. I'm more curious in the outcomes that the public is interested in. Would the public be open to seeing more B&Bs in Spanish Valley? If so, if there's an overwhelming interest in it, then we should look at the different policy options available to us. But ultimately, I'm afraid people will self-select out of giving their opinion on the outcomes because they won't fully understand or they may misinterpret the policy solutions we're providing to them.
Yeah, I mean, they're like, yeah, the options are kind of dense. Like there's, yeah, for people who aren't like following this conversation super closely, it might, I think.
I mean, my only devil's advocate to that is that because there is so much misunderstanding around B&Bs, it's nice to at least have a little bit of education around that to give people a more informed response. Because I think a lot of people respond to what they think is going on with B&Bs.
Yeah.
Often not the.
I agree. I fully with you that we need more education. I also,
well,
if people see a solution that they disagree with, and this is just like a cognitive bias thing, like if people see a solution that they disagree with, even if they might agree with the outcome the solution produces, then they could give us a false positive, or I guess a false negative of rejecting it. Because I guess like I'm just stating my opinion. This is not, at all assertive. It's just my opinion. But like any of these policy questions, for example, like HDHO, do people want to see more density in Spanish Valley? Are they open to it? Like HDHO became a very controversial topic. Some people may be open to it because of the most recent controversy related to the rules and regulations. Some people may have had one of those big developments come into their neighborhood, and so it completely turned them against density. Whereas generally, if it's like, would you be open to more density? Yes, slightly. Yes, considerably. Yes, in certain areas. No, not at all. I'd have to think about it. Like, I think at this point, there's so much specific debate right now around very specific policies and specific developments that we're sort of losing the opportunity to really regain an understanding of the heartbeat of the community. Like, do people think more density is something that would be at all feasible or palatable in Spanish Valley? If the answer is flat no, that's fine. If the answer is yes, I think we have a chance to go deeper, or to have a question that goes deeper. But I'm really curious in these more general questions because they give us more ability to actually find the right solutions, So 2 cents, but
maybe framing this, giving some bed and breakfast background about the legal non-conforming uses and that no new bed and breakfasts are permitted. And then say, would you like the existing bed and breakfast to continue? Would you like to see more bed and breakfast? Would you like to see more bed and breakfast only if the owner lives on site and it's 2 bedrooms or less? I would not like to see any new bed and breakfasts.
So Abby, that comes to the crux of my confusion here.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to talk about B&Bs, like a mom and pop that rent out a room and they serve breakfast, we ought to make sure that is clearly what we're asking about, versus do you want to see more Airbnbs, which could be a room, could be a house, could be a complex of houses. And, the Airbnb model is so different from the people that would actually serve breakfast, live on site, rent out a room in their house, that, it all, back when it was controversial, it all got wrapped in together and people were going, B&Bs, and they were actually thinking of the Airbnb model rather than a family situation that rents out a room and serves breakfast. So if we want to keep it kind of general for now, I'm okay with that. But if we're going to get more specific, we got to be real clear as to what the difference in the models are, so that they can make informed decisions.
Well, maybe those options could be like, yes, I would support a traditional bed and breakfast where the owners live on site and a limited number of bedrooms in the primary dwelling are rented out. Yes, I would support the ability for people to Airbnb their houses. I don't know. But I think shifting this away from specific policy solutions to the legal non-conforming use and a more general question of what, if any, kind of overnight rentals would you think are appropriate in your neighborhood? That could be a good way to reframe.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And that's actually,
I would agree. It's interesting, of course, because this was highlighted in yellow because I was suggesting a meeting ago or two to drop it. And was thinking, well, now we have B&B. Is it something you'd like to have off of 191? Maybe it's actually, I think it's off of the highway commercial area. And I was actually for dropping this, but it might be a good question along the way that Gary suggested, I think. Shifting positions.
And then I added question 4 just because I feel like question 3 could get at generally, do you want to see Airbnbs? And question 4 could be more like 20% of respondents would really like to rent out 1 to 2 bedrooms in their house if they were legally able to do so. Because I mean, that is a call that is very common to the planning and zoning office of like people who are just like, I'm going to be out of town for a couple weekends. I just want to do, some kind of pretty limited Airbnb situation in my house. And currently there's no way to do that. And maybe that's the right path. Maybe that's what people would like to preserve. But I think it would be interesting to get a little more data on how many people would like to do that if they were allowed, just to have that information. I also don't necessarily think that if there was a huge number of people who wish they could do that the right thing to do would be to allow it. But I think having that information would be useful. And that's also why.
Well, so then this is an interest.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say that's also why I just had as that question 1 to 2 bedrooms. Because that's generally what when people call our office inquiring about this, that's generally, they're not trying to buy a bunch of investment houses and run them as mini hotels. They're just like wanting to make a little extra money on busy weekends kind of thing. So I think, that it's more like a 1 to 2 bedroom option.
So I'm going to come back to the suggestion I made earlier, which is if we're really trying to understand the intersection of openness to this particular use and anticipated actual use of that use, I would be curious and just slash through 3 and instead say, are you, would you be in support of any of the following? Allowing people to occasionally rent out 1 to 2 bedrooms, allowing people to consistently, allowing people to rent out their entire unit when they are home, or when they're not home, let's give those options. And then let's ask the exact same options to see if that's something that people would want to use. Because what I would be really curious is whether or not people are interested in actually doing this in their own home, would they be open to other people doing it? Or is it truly only those who want to do it are open to it? Or is it just this is just not something we're seeing a lot of interest in? That's the sort of thing that we can use. The question 3 is useful with regards to the specific concern and complaint by those people to whom it applies. But I think more generally, if we want to survey the full county, I'm curious to know, is this a topic that is worth even revisiting as a body? A lot of changes have happened in the community in the last 3 or 4 years as far as decreasing affordability and such. And we might be surprised by some of the outcomes we see, whereas 3 is going to give us a very specific information that doesn't really help us make broader policy options. We can always get to that information later through
Did you go to the grocery store already?
Yeah.
Oh.
Can everyone mute if you're not muted? I think there's some echoing right now.
Grain,
so
beef, enchiladas, and salad. It'll be fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
And
I
Abby?
I think you're on the right track of having these, getting away from just being about what do we do with the legal non-conforming issue, and more broadly figure out what kind of take people's temperature on if they would like bed and breakfast in their neighborhood or not. And that information could inform this kind of question 3 as it's written, but also.
And maybe include
more things. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe include as an option, historically operated B&Bs in which the resident is an occupant of the home full time or something. So we can capture that without having to get lost in the nuance.
And Abby, it was, the point that Emily made was probably similar to the point I would have made. And it was basically, you'll probably get different answers. That is, some of us just don't plan to rent our house out anyway. And two, I think there's a lot of people who would not like, in kind of general, people renting out their houses for one or two, renting out one or two rooms.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
if they don't live here, what does that lead to? It looks like, well, I'll just do it for 9 months of the year and then I'll come down to Moab when I want to be here. So I think you'd get very different answers if you kind of ask, would you be in favor of having people being able to do such a thing? Then there'd be a lot of people who say we've got too many overnight rentals already. So very interesting the way the question is worded. You might even still be wanting to be able to do it yourself. So anyway, my thoughts.
Okay.
All right, let's start to wind this down, see if there's any additional comments, and then just make sure we have a clear set of next steps for where we take this before we move on to the next agenda item.
Yeah, I have one more point, which doesn't necessarily clarify things, but I do think it's interesting if we are getting this kind of data of what you would be in support of versus what you would do yourself. And with each survey, we also do have the information of whether people primarily live in Spanish Valley and work in Grand County, or whether they're second homeowners and don't work in Grand County. So I think, we have some other data points to kind of see how those trends work as well, which I do think is helpful. So if we are to go down that rabbit hole, we have some other metrics to really clarify, groups of people. So that's just a thought.
Okay. So I'll incorporate the notes from today into another update of the survey and loop in the new planning and zoning department staff when they start and get their thoughts and input, and then I think just bring it back to the planning commission, hopefully for maybe being at the point where just a few tweaks are needed.
I have just two real quick comments. I know I missed question number 6, but maybe a note might be if there is the option to do the little hover over definition on certain keywords, maybe having that it looks like node is no longer in there anymore. Oh, it is. Okay. So node, I just think that's a slightly jargon word where that could be helpful to have a little definition there. And then big picture on all of this, I just want to advocate for having a tester market to send this to. I know I've seen that with other surveys, but just to make sure we do that so we can really iron out the kinks if surely there won't be any because we've put so much darn time into this, but some other eyes on it other than ours before it goes to the masses.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Then I guess I will, if there's any other updates, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to stop screen sharing and I'll turn the agenda back over to Emily.
All right. OB, any final words there?
No, sounds very good. Abby did a great job of putting all of our comments together, and it really does look like we are close. The only other thing I'd say is maybe there needs to be some transition into the policy questions.
Okay.
I still worry, it does add length to the survey, but we are also interested in some general policy questions about Spanish Valley or something that does a transition, and we don't lose people, although I guess we'll get their partial answers if they decide to quit at that point. A little worry about it being extra long.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I had one more thought, which I had before we got into the policy question. And I don't know if this is just too much because to OB's point, it is a very long survey. But something I enjoyed about the small area plan survey was, even though it was underutilized, the question of what your general vision for the area is. And I do like the idea of prompting people somewhat creatively to just like riff a little bit on the things they'd like to see, because some really unexpected things could come out of that are not so like policy or land use code oriented, but about less concrete things that people want to see in their neighborhoods, and just like vision. I really like that idea of just using your imagination. What do you want your world to look like, kind of a question. So I wonder if even at the very end there could just be an open-ended, if you have time, what's your vision?
Yeah, I'll definitely add that in. I think that is a good question.
It's a great contribution. All right. Well, thank you, Obi and Abby, for continuing to drive that forward, and Tricia for your continued support and keeping the ball rolling from the side. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to our 5 p.m. citizens to be heard, which I know is a little bit late. If you're here to make a comment, if you could post, if you are here to make a comment on something that is not on the agenda as a public hearing, let me just clarify that. We are going to have 2 public hearings. If you're here to make a comment on one of the public hearings, please hold your comments back until that public hearing. If you'd like to make a comment on something that isn't on the agenda as a public hearing, please post in the chat that you'd like to speak. If that isn't available to you, you're welcome to come off mute and just say, I'd like to speak, and we'll call you in the order you will.
Emily, do you mind stating what the public hearings are, just so people that are online know that?
Absolutely not. We have a public hearing for the Rourke rezone at 68 King Street in Thompson Springs, and a public hearing for 200 Thompson Canyon Road in Thompson Springs, and we'll hold those in order. All right, so I'm not seeing or hearing anybody who'd like to speak for citizens to be heard. So we will move over to our first public hearing. If you are here for one of the 2 public hearings, here's our general format for these next 2 action items. We will first ask for a staff report for the first item, and invite the applicant to speak as well. Commissioners will have an opportunity to ask any questions of staff or of the applicant, just to make sure that we understand the application itself, at which point we will open the public hearing. If you want to speak on both public hearings and you're able to consolidate your comments into one comment, we'd appreciate it. That doesn't mean that your comment doesn't count for the weight of both. You could just clarify, and we'll make sure that they're in the record. If you want to comment on one of the 2 specifically, you're welcome to do that as well. So we will repeat this process for both public hearings, but hopefully this just makes sure everyone has a chance to speak, but don't feel like you have to speak twice. If you want to make one overarching comment, you're very welcome to do that as well. So with that in mind, we'll begin with our Rourke rezone action item for 68 King Street. And Abby, I will invite you to make the, do we have both the applicant here for both items?
I believe so. Who's going to call in? Jamie, if you have called in, please unmute yourself by doing *6.
Abby, can you hear me? This is Jamie Rourke.
Yep, we can hear you. All right, thanks, Jamie. Go back on mute, and we'll invite you to make an applicant statement after I give the staff presentation.
Excellent.
I'm going to mute you, and then I'll call you off mute again when the time's there. Thank you, Jamie. All right, so these are 2 separate pieces of property, slightly different, but there's definitely a lot in common between the 2 projects, the 2 proposals. And so I'm going to go a little more into detail on the first one, 68 King Street, but a lot of the considerations are going to be pretty similar for both projects. So the first one, 68 King Street in Thompson Springs. As you can see from the packet, I included the Thompson Springs zoning map in the packet with the parcels starred, just to show you that really the zoning in Thompson Springs is pretty all over the place. Thompson Springs was originally just zoned range and grazing. When zones were adopted in Moab, individual parcels have kind of piecemeal, one at a time, applied for rezones for specific projects or, specific uses, but there hasn't, the way that the zoning is in Thompson right now has not really been done holistically. So where we see zones on the ground, it's not necessarily, it doesn't indicate that this was like a master plan as to how this area should be zoned. It's more just, what any individual landowners that wanted to apply for rezones applied for rezones. Mostly historically they've been granted. You can see by the map too, range and grazing is a zone that typically, or that requires a minimum lot size of 5 acres. There are many zones in Thompson that are under 5 acres, even well under 5 acres, that are zoned range and grazing. So the range and grazing uses don't necessarily make sense with a lot of the parcels that are zoned range and grazing. Let me see. So this parcel is range and grazing, but you can see there's a lot, and the property is currently undeveloped. There has been a lot of talk lately and a lot of kind of heightened concern about water availability in Thompson Springs. And Grand County is currently in the process of working with an engineering firm to get more concrete data on what water availability really looks like. So we don't have that data back yet. It's likely that we will have more data by the time this project were to go to county commission. So the county commissioners might have more information, more water information to make that decision. This applicant has been given approval from the Thompson Water District to get, for both rezones that are being considered today, the Thompson Water District has allocated taps to the applicant that the applicant has paid for maximum build out should a rezone be granted, which on this lot, if a rezone were granted, it could facilitate up to 5 lots. Honestly, it might be tough to get 5 lots on there with road access for each of the lots. It could be more like 4 lots, but 5 taps have been allocated and paid for this property. The reason that this applicant is applying for a rezone to small lot residential instead of maybe large lot residential is that with small lot residential, you could typically get a minimum lot size of 0.2 acres. However, Thompson's entirely on septic systems. And to make a septic system work in Thompson, you have to have at least 0.42 acres. So a rezone to large lot residential has a minimum lot size of 0.5 acres, which is just above that 0.42 threshold. So a rezone to SLR would allow essentially a minimum lot size that can support septic, which is a 0.42 acre lot. So even though a rezone to SLR could in other places facilitate more lots because of the septic consideration, we're not going to see lots under 0.42 of an acre. Let me see. Yeah, it is compatible with the general plan, and as much as the general plan, speaks about Thompson. And let me see. Yeah, that kind of gives the rundown. Before we open it up to an applicant statement, are there any questions from planning commissioners for staff on this project?
Abby?
Sorry.
Abby, I had just a very quick question. Special Services Water District Board, out of curiosity, is that then, are they residents of Thompson?
Yes.
They are, okay. And then there is typically with us, GWSSA would say, well, we can service them with water, but you're saying also the county is doing a water study of that area. How does that interact here?
And maybe Tricia, please jump in if there's any information you can add, but the county commission's office, because of this concern about water in Thompson Springs, the county commission's office is is working with an engineering firm just to get kind of an assessment of water availability in Thompson, what the spring that people are getting water from is capable of delivering. And so that hard data isn't exactly out there, but it's definitely a high priority to get that engineering done so that it's clear how much water availability there is for future build out in Thompson.
Do you want me to add a little bit to this, or? Okay. Yeah, the water board are volunteers. Their master plan is extremely old, 2003. They have no basically updated water study whatsoever. So this development, or the developments that are kind of following this one, really prompted kind of a scare, like, whoa, there's all of a sudden a big demand for water. And that's kind of what we asked for originally. And I'm not a voting member on the board, or I wasn't at that time, was just, just let us get these other pieces in place before we make decisions. I will state, and I'm being as honest as possible, there was a tremendous amount of pressure put on that board to make a decision right away. And that pressure came from lawyers. So we're sitting in these water board meetings that last 4 hours, and lawyers are involved. And so via that pressure, they, conceded to okay some taps. That being said, the county has finally stepped in. I've been asking, and the water board's been asking for some assistance. And the goal is to get Sunrise Engineering to produce a detailed water study so that we know the capacity of those springs. I mean, they have no capacity whatsoever to tap into an aquifer. It's different than groundwater and sewer, where at any time they just drill another well. That is not a capacity that Thompson has. Their water, their culinary water, comes from those springs. And over the last 10 years, those springs, and I probably already stated this, are producing half of what they did 10 years ago. And I can tell you, just on an anecdotal level, I spent a lot of time in the Book Cliffs. I'm seeing a lot of springs in the Book Cliffs that are kind of, springs that wildlife rely on, starting to dry up. Those taps were okayed, but we're still at this place where on an ethical level, I feel that, we need to know that we can provide water not only for future development, but also sustaining the current community, into the future. So that's kind of where we're at. We're looking at trying to get a detailed water study. We're trying to get an updated master plan. We need that master plan. They are talking about possibly tapping into another spring up there, but the BLM said we need an updated master plan to be able to move forward with that infrastructure. So that's where we're at.
I have two questions. One for you, Trish. So there is an updated master plan in the works, and when? No. I mean, all of this is, we need to do these things, right? And so Chris Baird has helped us quite a bit. We have a couple, we are working in avenues, but none of that is, and unfortunately, and I'll just be really honest, the water board isn't able to move forward with some of these larger picture items when they're just dealing with lawyers constantly. They're just under a ton of pressure. Okay. At one point they all resigned. I've been able to bring them back. I mean, it's just this, understandably they're volunteers. It's, just like you guys, if you came to the table every single meeting and were threatened, it's a tough position out there. And I think they're trying to do the best that they can for that community. Okay. So there's a request for a new master plan out. And then my question for Abby, because it seems like the scope of density for single lot residential would be sort of organically capped by the septic field requirement, is there any potential future of Thompson having like a municipal sewer system that would change that?
I think Thompson's a long ways from that happening. Yeah.
Abby, I would agree also. Castle Valley, for instance, doesn't. Very costly process. Of course, I guess anything could happen, but very unlikely in any near future.
Yeah, Opie, I'm really glad that you're here because you live in a very similar community facing similar issues, and so it's great. Your input is really needed.
I have a couple of
I have a question about, oh, go ahead, Rick.
I think somebody said there was additional taps approved already. And do they have anything to do with these applications?
I'm not sure what the status is of taps that have been approved for different projects, but these two projects that we are looking at today do have taps approved by the water board for them. Yeah, so this project and the next one, the number of taps that would be required for maximum build out with a zone change to SLR and a consideration of septic system, there have been taps allocated for maximum build out for both projects.
So if the survey says they're at maximum already, or there's some excess, what is it, first come, first serve, or is that why there's people getting in line to do this, or?
I am not sure how to, I'm not sure how that would go. Trish, do you have any idea? Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns right now.
I mean, there is, and unfortunately, there is a long line right now. So, yeah, it's yeah. I will state, and I want to just read a little statement that I got from Christina today. Also, she said the Division of Wildlife, sorry, I'm on that board. So sorry about that. We got to get wildlife and water. So DWR and a contract engineer have both indicated that the Thompson Springs Special Service likely does not have sufficient water to approve new connections. The data shows that as of 2023, Thompson may even have a deficiency to serve their current connections. Additional water studies are needed by the Special Service District before they commit to more connections. So that's just there's been quite a bit of conversation, and obviously none of that, is hard data, but that's just some general statements from, Water Rights Division.
How many other taps have been approved currently but are not being utilized? Do we know that number?
I don't have that information.
I want to say, and Steve, I could be slightly, I'm having my memory serve me. I want to say we have 15 that they have approved. I think. I could be totally wrong on that. And it may be that one of the other board members is on and could solidify that, but I think it was 15.
Okay, thank you. And this next question, I think it's almost perhaps identical to Rick's, but maybe expanding on it a little bit. If this were to be approved, now the water right is with the water board. And so now they're kind of, as I understand it, please correct me where I'm wrong. And now they're kind of pooled into this. So now they've got this, it's not their own individual water right, but I'm just, I hear the comment or the letter we read where people are concerned that have been living out there, and it's now, now I'm not going to have access to water. I guess I could just use some clarity on what does this actually mean, since we're not talking water rights itself. or themselves?
Sorry, Steve. I think that's a great question. What I'd like to do is for the people who have been waiting to speak, I'd like to move forward and then we can come back to some of these questions that are a little bit more nuanced before we take a vote as part of discussion. So I don't mean to interrupt you and I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
Please hold on to that question. But if there's no clarifying questions for the staff report, I just want to move us along into the actual public hearing and then we'll come back to conversation and just clarification and clarifying questions. Sound good? Okay, so let's invite the applicant to make a statement and then we'll go forward to the public hearing itself.
So Jamie, you can come off mute again and make your statement. And it's *6 to come unmuted.
Thanks, guys. Hey, Abby, appreciate the really good recap on this situation here. Hey, there's just a few things that I think ought to be brought to the surface before all, and that is that there's a lot of emotions, and I feel that the emotions are kind of overwhelming this situation here. And Ms. Hadeen, I would speak first to your situation and talking about attorneys. Bear in mind that that's 5 months worth of attorneying just to buy 7 water taps. This is the extent at which I've been stonewalled here by the TSSD. It hasn't been a pleasant nor a expeditious event at all. I'm really quite disappointed in that, especially considering the dramatic need that Grand County has for a bedroom community. I think it ought to be bear in mind that the youngest member of the Thompson Springs community is 20 years old. There isn't any young families here at all. This place has just kind of been choked out. And the reality is it's a mess, and with a little bit of work, it could be a nice bedroom community that would serve the Moab area. And there's a definite need for that, not just for the businesses in Moab, but for the blue collar people that live here in Grand County or in San Juan County and work in Moab. Several of the members have expressed to me, even people I didn't know up here, that they'd sure love to see some new blood in here, some new families. It's just really a disappointment that we've had to be difficult like this to get anything going on up here. But one of the good things that I've got here, other than it's flat and easy to develop ground, is that I've got clean new surveys and I don't have any of the plaguing of the really mismatched border lines and surveys that kind of the center of the old community suffers from. I don't know where all those errors came from, but by the grace of God, I'm not suffering with any of those. I've got, clean, even lines here. I've got good road access. We got electricity close by. We got water, et cetera. So really, this is a pretty clean slate, pretty easy to move forward with, and it'd be just an excellent little growth here. I know there's a lot of people up here that would like to see things just stay the way they are. Maybe we should all still be riding horses, but the reality is I got a 2008 Toyota pickup, and it beats any horse I ever had. I think a lot of other things should be, kind of drawn into context, that we ought to look at the merit on this situation, not just the emotions involved. I know a lot of people are just anti-growth at any expense, but, it's strange that often comes from the people who came from somewhere else, and as soon as they get to where they really like it, they like to close the gate behind them. And that's really a pretty short-sighted view that I see popping up here as well. So anyhow, with that, I would be happy to field questions for you guys, and I appreciate your time and considerations on this matter.
All right, thank you. To the commission, are there any questions clarifying the application itself before we open up the public hearing? If there's further discussion, we may be welcome to invite the applicant to chime in during our discussion section, but just any questions specific to the application itself. Okay. It's 5:45, so I will open this public hearing, and I think what we'll do is we'll open this public hearing for the first application, and we will leave it open through the second agenda item, and then we'll close them both together, and that way nobody feels as though if they comment on the first one, they're missing the second one, and also that way we can sort of consolidate conversation and discussion. So we won't go into group discussion or a vote until after we've heard both agenda items and closed both public hearings. So our public hearing is open. If you are here to make a comment about the first agenda item, which is 68 King Street, or if you'd like to make a comment about both agenda items, you're welcome to do that. If you have a comment only about the 200 Thompson Canyon Road, please hold your comments for the second agenda item. And it looks like, Jamie, if you could mute your phone. Okay.
Jamie, I just muted you again, and we'll invite you to come off mute if there's questions to answer. Thanks.
One day we will be in person again. And all this silliness. Okay. So if you're here to make a comment, if you could please just come off of mute or put into the chat that you'd like to make a comment.
Hi, this is Marla Soldroyd. My family has been in Thompson since the mid-1900s. So, Jamie, we're not newbies. And we're not anti-growth. However, Thompson has always been kind of a small town community, and my main concern is the water. Will there be enough to sustain the people that are there, or even a small amount of growth? I'm not sure the residents of Thompson are interested in being a bedroom community per se. I would certainly support having 1 unit per half acre in town, 1 unit per acre outside of the town boundaries, but I think that 5 per acre is that's pretty close. I also have a concern that this will set a precedent that at some point y'all are going to want to come in and rezone the entire town to those specifications. And every time something like this happens in Thompson, my property taxes go up, and I don't want to do that either. I want to secure my property for the future, for my family and my heirs. And I really believe that Jamie's just trying to make a buck. He bought up a lot of property on speculation, and I don't blame him. He wants to sell it and make the most he can on what he's got. But the character of the community should be preserved. And I don't think that small lot residential will do that. I think the large lot residential would be fine for those properties. And I'm talking about both properties in all of these comments. But I would like to vote no on this, or say no to the small residential designation. It's just not part of what our community has been. And just for the record, I probably own as much or more property in Thompson than almost anybody else. So that's all I needed to say about that.
Thank you for your comments. Would anybody else like to make a comment during the public hearing? Okay, we'll hold this public hearing open and move on to the second action item, which is also a public hearing on the rezone with the same applicant for 200 Thompson Canyon Road. Yes, Abby.
We should, unless you'd like to rearrange things, have a vote specific to this parcel before discussing the next. I think you can, or did you say you wanted to leave the public hearing open, discuss the next parcel, and then do both votes? Okay.
I think so, because I think discussion, yeah.
Okay.
So
you're right. I think you're right. The discussion is going to be pretty similar on both. So I'll just give a quick description of this next one, and then Jamie, you'll be able to make an applicant statement for the 200 Thompson Canyon Road.
Abby, can we just really quick?
Oh,
sorry, really quick. Can we just? I think there are some more people on hold, but can we just? Are there any cattlemen that are on hold that wanted to speak? I just wanted to make sure.
If anyone is
No.
on the phone, if anyone has called in and would like to participate, the way you unmute yourself is you hit *6. So I do see, I mean, there are a bunch of people in this Zoom meeting. So if any of you are on the phone and would like to make comment, *6 will unmute yourself. And we could take any public comment now, or if you'd like to wait until after the description of the second property, you could do public comment then.
That's part of the reason I want to keep this open with the number of phones on the line and people not speaking up. So what we'll do is we'll move on to the second applicant statement.
Or this,
Actually, I'm sorry. We'll move on to the
first.
What'd you say?
Oh, I'll give a quick staff report
Yeah.
first on the second property.
Yeah. So move on to the staff report, then the applicant statement, then we'll open the second hearing and we'll invite anybody to speak on the two of them. Okay. So Abby.
So yeah, as you'll see, the second application has a lot of the same considerations from 200 Thompson Canyon Road. One difference with this property is that in, I think 2016, the property has already applied to be rezoned once. This property was initially zoned range and grazing at the same time that the entire town of Thompson was zoned range and grazing. And in 2016 received a approval of a rezone from range and grazing to rural residential. So this lot is 1.32 acres. So rural residential would only allow one unit to be developed on this. One unit and possibly one accessory dwelling unit to be developed on this parcel. And the same thing. So this is a little, so anyway, rural residential makes a little more sense on the ground than range and grazing because it at least meets the minimum lot size requirement of the zone. But let me see, and the same similar thing with this parcel, it has the maximum number of lots that could be created given the considerations for septic and small lot residential would be 3 lots. And this, the applicant has received approval from the Thompson Water District for 3 taps for this parcel. And I believe 1 is even installed. 1 is installed and 2 are paid for, but not installed yet. And then the considerations are very similar. Small lot residential, there would make sense in the context of Thompson. There's many other lots that are zoned small lot residential. However, building anything beyond, or building anything smaller than a 0.42 acre property is not currently possible with septic technology. So any other questions for me or for staff on this specific parcel or this specific project? Okay.
So Jamie, if you'd like to, you may make a second applicant statement. I will ask, if you don't mind, to add statements that are net new. I think we are trying to reduce just duplicative statements, but feel free to come off of mute and address this application.
Abby, thanks again for a good start to this. I don't really have anything new to add to that one. Both of these lots, when I bought them, were in disarray, a lot of trash and refuse on them. The 200 Thompson Canyon Road was nowhere near as bad as 68 King Street. I think when we took on 68 King Street, we took out 8 or 10 junk vehicles, and I don't know how many junk campers, and just scrap iron and trash and dumpster loads of trash. Luckily, 200 Thompson Canyon Road was in much better condition. Once again, it's flat, it's nice, it's got good road access. There's a power line right over the top of it. We've got one water tap half installed, and then we found out that we've got actually a 2-inch branch line that comes off of the main line under the road and right to the lot line, which is a real bonus. Makes it super easy to go ahead and put additional taps in there. I put in a real nice entryway there with a couple of steel stallion silhouettes I'm sorry I didn't figure out how to upload pictures to the package for the rest of you guys. I suppose anybody that's been up here in Thompson Springs in the last year and a half or 2 years has probably seen those. It's a nice 24 foot wide gate entryway, which makes it really easy if somebody wants to pull in with a horse trailer or a big RV trailer, whatever. There's just gobs of room there. It's got easy access, you know, just all the way around. It's well suited for that. I've got a new neighbor right on the other side of the road. They've just finished pouring a big slab for a nice new garage. And I don't know what all else they're doing there, but I think there's a house coming soon. So it's good to see that is, and I hate to use the term the good side of town, because the township, even though it's not a legal township, is so small anyhow. But definitely that's probably the nicest lot in town. It's got a good view of the LaSalle's. It just all the way around looks out nice. It's sharp to look at. It presents well. And in there again, I mean, there's a lot of merit. I would hope that one goes to somebody that's maybe not the working class, maybe somebody that's just a retiree that wants to come and spend money and time in Grand County and enrich the area. I think other than that, I think everything else just stands for itself.
All right, thank you for your comments. So again, to the commission, if there's anything clarifying this specific application, you're welcome to raise that. Otherwise, we'll save discussion until after we've closed both public hearings. All right, and Jamie, if you wouldn't mind muting if you're done with your comments, just because the echoes.
Sorry.
You know, one more comment before I unmute there. Back to Marlis. Marlis, I don't think there's a large lot residential option anymore in Grand County. And I don't have any intention of going down to 0.2 acre lots, which would be 5 unit per acre density. We're pretty well metered out here just for the septic systems at 0.4 or 0.41 acres per residence.
All right, thank you very much for the clarification.
You bet, thank you.
So is there anybody else who would like to make a comment? If you are, for whatever reason, unable to connect or unable to be heard, you are welcome to email the Planning Commission as well. We can, or email Abby with the Planning Department. I know Zoom can get kind of finicky, so. Oh,
Hello,
goodness. I'm so sorry. Wait, I'm so sorry. I need to open this public hearing for the second agenda item. Forgive me. So it is 5:58 and I'm opening the public hearing for considering 200 Thompson Canyon Road. So sorry, if you were trying to speak, go ahead. Please state your name for the record.
Hello, my name is John Oldroyd, and I will be inheriting a fair amount of property there. And so I just wanted to put on the record that I would not support the smaller lot sizes, but the larger lot sizes, as Marlis had mentioned earlier, and that only after a new water survey has been completed. Over.
John, would you clarify if you're speaking on one of the specific applications or both applications?
Both applications.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak during this public hearing or either of the public hearings that are currently open? Okay.
You know, Emily, could I ask John a question? Because I kind of missed the last part, or maybe I'll just ask.
If you want to clarify, that's fine. Otherwise, let's save for discussion.
Yes, it was the concern getting a new water study before approval. Is that basically what he said at the very end?
Yes, sir. That's it. I'm concerned about how much water there is available there, and think it would be prudent to get a new water survey before approving any other rezonings.
Great, thank you much.
So I'm concerned that there are so many phones called in and we don't have people speaking. So what I'm going to do is keep these public hearings open for a bit longer. We'll open discussion. I know there were some additional questions that Steve, you had, and I'm sorry I cut you off earlier, just to clarify some of the nuances of this area. Oh, I see a number ending in 0011. Are you trying to speak?
You're correct.
Would you state your name, please?
This is Tom Cox. resident of Thompson Springs, new resident actually, about the last 5 years or so. I was standing on the TSSD Special Service District Water Board. Up until about a month ago, I was one of the ones that resigned that Tricia spoke of. First and foremost, if you'll follow the meeting notes, Jamie did agree to partake. Mr. Rourke did agree to partake in a water study before a large amount of water taps were administered to him. I truly believe in the last 10 or 15 years, and I've made my point several times, that the amount of water that we're receiving right now through the spring system is at 50% or less than what it was 10, 15 years ago. A water study is mandated. It's got to be. But the next meeting come around, and through discussion with his lawyers, we, as a board, TSSD board, we did allow Jamie a handful of taps based on the contingency that he was approved with the Planning and Zoning Commission to be able to subdivide these pieces of property from grazing down to small lot. If it's approved, the water taps have been approved, and I do not deny that. I was part of the vote on that one. And I commend Mr. Rourke, no ifs, ands, or buts, on the amount of property that he has up here. But by the same token, I was listening to Marlis, and I think there's got to be a line drawn in the sand somewhere. Up until the point that we have additional water supplied to this area. We not only have the current residents, we also have current commercial. We have Moab Umtra that we have to contend with, that not just owns the water line from Thompson Springs to Crescent Junction. They maintain it at this point in time. And if you're not only considering that, Mr. Rourke also owns property, and he does have a few water rights that were negotiated early on, maybe 20 years ago, with Mr. Rourke's family, on 3 or 4 taps back on his 40 acres out there. We not only have to contend with the idea that we have to supply water for our current customers and commercial businesses out here, including DOT or UDOT. We also have to contend with the rest areas, Moab Umtra, the 7-Eleven, the Exxon station, etc. We also have a few RV commercial properties. One of the commercial properties just grew exponentially. They doubled in size. At that point, they were approved for water. It was a non-issue because nobody was asking for water. Well, the last few years, the little town got kind of popular. And Mr. Rourke, I commend him all day long on the amount of property he owns. But he doesn't own the water. He may be approved for water taps, but there is no water rights in Mr. Rourke's name. And the unfortunate factor is, if we open the door for small lot residential on these 2 pieces of property, we're going to open the door for 2 other pieces of property. I believe one's about 80 acres and another one's about 40 acres. We don't have the water. And without a master plan, that's what one of the deals that BLM's asking for. And another one is, if we can't, we live in a desert community out here. We don't have the ability to drill. Our sole source of water is through a spring system that's currently developing anywhere from 75 to 85 gallons per minute. We had twice that amount 15, 20 years ago. So I'll end this conversation, and Jamie will honestly rebuke me, and I commend that to him, but it's a non-issue to me. There's a lot of cattlemen that depend on the water too. Not just the cattlemen with water rights, with senior water rights. We also have an irrigation user that's got some semi-senior or junior water rights in the canyon. We have to contend with the fire department. We have to have fire. A volunteer service of 1 I'll repeat
Sir,
that. We
Your
have a
comments are
volunteer
reaching
service of water.
5 minutes. I'll ask if you'll just
I'll cut
find
it
a
down.
gentle conclusion.
We do. Yeah, we also have a loadout. We have a loadout for watermen, for the cattlemen and the sheep herders in the area. I'm surprised they've not called in or they can't get off the mute button. But like you said a minute ago, I got on here with the Store 6. I hope the other cattlemen will comment on this. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. All right. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? I think this largely covers the phones I see in the participants list. All right, so at 6:06, I'm going to close both public hearings that were open this evening. If you did not get a chance to speak and that was an error, please just come and post in the chat and we may reopen the hearing, but I do want to move us into discussion. So Steve, I'll let you pick up where you left off. And at this point, if there's questions, further questions to the applicant or further questions to staff, if you could just sort of clarify which of the two or if it's crosstalk. What we will hold until the vote is any comments or discussion specifically about either a specific motion, modifying a potential motion, the merits of the question, et cetera. Those I will ask you to put a motion on the table before discussing. So if there's any clarifying questions, go ahead. And Steve, I'll let you start with the table.
Okay. So Tricia, I saw your comment about, was it first come, first serve? So maybe I'll play out a quick, like a actual example here, and we can pick this apart so I can have a better understanding. Let's say this water board, they have 5 customers and we think safe yield is 5 customers. We're not sure yet, but 3 more people got approved, 3 more taps. Now we find there's not enough water to go around. Do those 3 new taps, the 3 newest, and let's say, we need to drop 3 customers to provide for everybody else. Do those 3 customers, because they're the newest in line, do they get culled from the herd, or what happens there? That's my question. I don't know how this
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, these are discussions that, whether it's, the Department of, we don't know. I mean, I don't know if this community is probably like a lot of other small communities in the sense like they have this very finite resource. And Tom was correct in stating that there's a lot of water rights that aren't actually being used yet. I mean, that's the other scary thing. So I think this water study would not only encompass actual wet water, but also paper water, right? Those are 2 very different things. There's a lot of paper water out there that's not being used. And the point that he was making about cattlemen or wool growers, some of those cattlemen have senior water rights and they are pulling water. They go to the loadout to pull water to water their animals out specifically in winter range. But there's also, for example, Butch Jensen up on, he has his cattle out in the Cisco desert, and he has for 37 years. He's been getting water out of those springs. So, and again, he doesn't have rights to it, but there is like, are you serving, like you said, Steve, what customers are you serving first? And I don't know what happens when you've allotted water that you don't have. But I think we might want to figure this out because I think we're, not that far behind. I mean, I know I keep playing that scary, but I think it's something for our community to really be thinking about too.
I kind of just want to throw something out here to kind of be prudent but still expeditious with this, or expedient with this. And I don't know, I'm still learning the straw poll thing. To me, I'm just throwing it out there that with the zoning itself, if water was not an issue, I don't think I would have an issue with the rezoning. It sounds, you know, we look at the staff opinion or recommendation, it looks like to approve. It's not spot zoning. You know, it's overall eight units total. I just wonder, I'm just throwing it out there if other people might be on board with a conditional approval that once a water study is done to pass that on, because I mean, the buck doesn't stop here. It's ultimately the county commission. So I'm just throwing that out there because maybe there's more of us on the same page. And so.
I think you could make a motion with a condition and see if it's second and then go from there. But because we are looking at two specific properties, I would say start with making a motion on one of the properties. And then you could, after that discussion and how that plays out, could make a similar motion on the second properties, but each property is going to need its own motion and vote.
Okay.
So really quick, before we go into a motion, I just want to make sure that there's no other clarifying questions by member of the commissions to staff or to the applicant. I just want to make sure we're all going into the question or discussion with information. So does anyone else have any specific questions for staff or for the applicant? OB, looks like maybe you're trying to.
There, I am unmuted. I think I would have several questions, but I don't know that anybody here can answer them. I don't even know that the town has water rights or where they stand in relations to other people. I assume if their special services district can actually approve taps, they have some kind of water rights, but I don't know, you know, how they stand with somebody who herds cattle. I can't remember the name of it, but people up in the LaSalles who herded cattle, let's say, for 60 years and didn't have water rights are entitled to water rights of some sort because they've been there for so long. So I'm really interested in not only the service, but the water rights that people have and when they are.
Right. So the town does have some senior water rights. I'm just kind of, Tom is giving me a little bit of information right now, but I don't know. Oh, right there in the Allreds, JK Allred, which is a cattleman out there, he has senior water rights also. So the town and then another a cattleman.
When you say that, Trish, do they have equal senior water rights, or does one of them have water rights that precede the other?
He's writing me right now. We'll see what he says. I'm being, and Tom will know, you know, he was the chair of the water board. I've been going to the water meeting since January. So I'm learning a lot. But, I'll let you know. I'll put it into the chat when he gets it.
I think it is valuable to get, you know, this information where we have it, but I think that Steve was kind of had the right idea that most of the water questions right now are fairly unknown, and there's a strong desire to prioritize, you know, the county's commission's office is doing what they can to get water engineering study happening kind of as quickly as is feasible, because it's a little hard to get bogged down in too many of these theoreticals and different, you know, potential scenarios, because I think that when there's the actual engineering study, that's going to answer a lot of them. And so I think considering this rezone, I mean, it's impossible to separate it from the issue of water concerns, but yeah, maybe incorporating that in a condition and looking at the merits of the rezone itself on all the dimensions.
I think that's good advice, Abby. This is a legislative decision, and so the body doesn't need to have a specific reason for sending a favorable or unfavorable recommendation. So it doesn't need to be governed by justification, but I do think it's worth considering specific guidance we would give to the county commission on how we would recommend them considering these particular two questions. Okay. Any other clarifying questions? Okay, Steve, did you want to make a motion then?
Yeah, I move to forward a favorable recommendation to the county commission for the rezone of approximately 2.22 acres located at 68 King Street, parcel number 0700210153, from range and grazing to small lot residential, with the condition that a study for safe water yield is completed.
Okay, motion on the table.
Did you want to say completed before?
Before the county commission makes their decision. Is that going to suffice?
All right, I saw that seconded by OB. Rick, you beat Garish the first time and all right. So we have a motion on the
But
table.
I am here, Abby, I am here.
I saw that, Garish. Thank you very much. So Steve, a motion by Steve to send a favorable recommendation for the first of the two agenda items with the condition that a water study on safe yield is completed before the county commission takes up this question, seconded by OB. Steve, you're welcome to add any comments followed by OB, and then we can have open discussion on this item.
I do.
Let's Steve go first if he has any comments, and then OB, and then Garish will be up next. That's okay.
I just think it's imperative to understand how much water's up there before moving further and allocating, or well, not allocating, but changing, rezoning anything that could bring more users in, deplete the resource further if it's not able to handle that pressure.
And I would just agree with what Steve said.
And I disagree with both of you. I think it's whether or not these lots are developable is going to be determined by a number of things, and availability of water is just one. Changing the zone does not guarantee them any water. And if they find out that they don't have the ability to hook up to water, then the lots will be rezoned, but they won't be developed. So I've got a little different take. I think we should separate out the rezone, either vote yes or no on the rezone, and not try to put any conditions on it. That's my take.
Abby, just a clarifying question. Sorry, Jason, let me just clarify this before we go forward. So the motion on the table is to have a study done before it's taken up by the county commission. Did I restate that correctly, Steve? The way that this would normally go is staff would present this to county commission. And then I guess if they said, well, that's a great recommendation, let's table it. Or do we need to direct staff? I mean, or how would we, if this was something we wanted to vote on and edit it as it is, would we need to clarify it?
I think my thought, Abby, is that Abby or whoever would present for the planning commission could state that there are obvious concerns about water availability, and that there was discussion about whether or not the rezone application should be not recommended because of the water situation. And if we vote to recommend it, that could be background information that goes along with the presentation at county commission.
Yes, the water background and reasons for voting is definitely something that gets included in the county commission packets. And I think it's hard to say, but I think the timing of the study and the timing of when this project would come before the county commission are probably going to be pretty similar. I think I spoke with Chris Barrett about this, and there's just a lot of unknowns, but he's really hoping that the water engineering study is ready in the next few weeks to a month, which is probably about the amount of time it would take for this to be scheduled with county commission anyway, considering legal review and some of the other issues. So that gives us a little more information. But I think Commissioner Willis really does have a point that if there were a motion to vote on this just on the rezone without any conditions, the context of the discussion and the concerns would be a part of the consideration from the county commission before they voted as well.
I would say I like the condition because it's very, very clear why we would approve it. If it wasn't developable, I probably would leave it range and grazing. But so I like the condition. I probably wouldn't vote for it without the condition.
Josie, do you want to make your comments?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Garish, but possibly towards a different conclusion. But I also don't want to assume that, because I agree that water doesn't seem to be the only issue here, though it is a very big issue. And I'm hesitant to even want to approve anything with conditions of water availability on it when there seem to be so unknowns around that. But in addition, it does seem that zooming out from these two parcels, that Thompson Springs does need more of a master plan. And so I also think that that's something that I would want to be put into consideration before approving a rezoning towards more small lot residential. And I don't totally, this would have been one of my questions to staff, but I don't know if this is an easy answer of why these rezones to small lot residential have already taken place and sort of what the context and reasoning behind that is. Because sort of my general understanding of Thompson, it doesn't seem like the most appropriate zoning for that town, both based on resources and based on character. So I would be interested to see more of a master plan for the entire community that really would spell out a very good reason for, in general, promoting that level of density, because I'm not sure that I see a need for it.
Rick, do you have any comments to contribute?
Got off mute. After listening to everybody talk, I'm kind of seeing all three points of view. I can see where Josie's coming from. I'm assuming that the Thompson Water District Board or whatever that is, do they report to the county commission? Are they subject to, because the water supposedly is their business, but obviously they have to be reminded, and there's plenty of people reminding them that there needs to be enough water for everybody. So I'm not so sure in planning that we need to be in their place, but if somebody's overlooking the water, I certainly see where we would put conditions on it. So I can see a little bit of everybody's point of view. And I think that everybody's headed in the same direction with concerns about, is this the right thing to do at the right time? I don't have an answer for all that either.
All right, Josie, Garish, or anyone else, do you plan to make a substitute motion before we call the question, or would you? I mean, that's an option you have.
I was planning on just voting against Steve's motion and then making a new one. But
the way the Roberts rules works is you can have one primary motion and up to one or maybe two substitute motions at the table at the same time. The substitute motion, if it's made, would get taken up first, and if it passes, then the original motion would essentially be null and void. Otherwise, we would return to vote on that original motion if the substitute motion fails. But if we make a motion to send a, in this case, a favorable but conditional recommendation, we wouldn't accept a second motion to send an unfavorable recommendation. You need to replace it with a substitute motion up front.
I would make a substitute motion.
Okay.
Okay. I move to forward an unfavorable recommendation to the County Commission for the rezone of approximately 2.22 acres located at 68 King Street, parcel number 07-0021-0153 from range and grazing to small lot residential.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, so that fails for want of a second. Garrett, just to confirm, to make sure that you can hear Josie.
Yeah, I can hear her.
Okay. So we will vote on the original motion made by Steve and seconded it'll be if there are no substitute motions to place on the table. Okay, so we have a motion to send a favorable let me pull out my packet so I state this exactly. A motion to send a favorable recommendation to the county commission to the rezone of approximately 2.22 acres located at 68 King Street from range grazing to small lot residential with the condition that a water feasibility study assessing safe yield is completed before the item goes before the county commission. A motion by Steve and seconded by OB. All in favor of this motion, raise your hand or say aye. So 4 in favor, all opposed. Josie and Garish, are you?
I'm
abstaining?
opposed, yes.
Opposing. All right, so 4 in favor, 2 opposed, so that passes. Now we will open discussion on the second item, and if there's no additional discussion, anybody is free to make a motion on this item.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we send a favorable recommendation to the county commission for the rezone of this property to SLR.
Okay, and any conditions on this one?
Nope.
All right, motion on the table to send a favorable recommendation made by Garish. Is there a second? Okay, seeing none, the motion fails for lack of a second. Is there another motion that somebody would like to place on the table? You can second this motion and add an amendment if you would like. So if there is an interest in the general gist of Garish's motion, you may second it and then make a motion to amend.
Then yes, I would second that with a condition.
Okay, hold on. So motion by Garish, seconded by Steve. We'll come back to the amendment. Garish, do you have any further comments?
No, my comments on the previous motions are applicable. I just don't think that it's our place to try to set conditions on rezones. And I think if there's water available, they probably will develop. And if there's not water available, they just have a zone change and the property stays vacant. So to me, it's pretty clear cut and simple.
Okay. So Steve, it's your floor. And if you'd like to amend the motion, you're welcome to make a motion to amend.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to amend. Now, do I need to say that whole motion or can I just say that?
Amend Garish's motion with the following.
Okay, I recommend Garish's motion with I move to make a motion to I'm lost.
Amend.
Now.
You're doing it.
To amend Garish's motion, and that would be to add in the condition of doing a water feasibility study to assess safe water yield before the county commission takes this agenda item up.
All right. Motion to amend by Steve. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by OB. Any discussion? Any substitute motions? Okay, with that, we'll call the question on the motion to amend first, and then depending on the results of that, or regardless of the results, that will return to the original motion. So there's a motion to add a condition to Garrett's motion that before this item were to go before the county commission, if it got a favorable recommendation that there was a water feasibility study to assess safe yield. So all in favor of amending Garish's motion, raise your hand or say aye. 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed?
I'm opposed.
Opposed? Josie, do you abstain or vote in favor or against?
I'm abstaining on this particular.
Okay, so with that, 4 in favor, 1 abstention, 1 opposed, the amendment to the motion passes. So we now have an amended motion on the table to send a favorable recommendation to the County Commission for the rezone of approximately 1.32 acres located at 200 Thompson Canyon Road from rural residential to small lot residential, with the condition that the if water feasibility study is completed assessing safe yield before the item goes before the County Commission. All in favor of the amended motion, raise your hand or say aye. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor, all opposed. Josie, Girish?
Yep.
You're opposed. Okay, with 4 in favor and 2 opposed, the motion passes. All right, is there anything else on these 2 items that we need to take care of?
No, those motions addressed, sorry, both rezone requests.
All right, well, I thank everybody for contributing to the public hearing. If you would like to, you are welcome to write a letter to the County Commission. The County Commission will hold a public hearing in the future, so you will have additional opportunities to comment, and please do so. So that moves us on to future considerations.
So the main future considerations I had actually came up earlier. Just the OAO redevelopment and expansion discussion is going to be taken on by the County Commission in a little more detail in a workshop soon. And then also the new staff in the Planning and Zoning Department. The new director starts this week. So you'll see him at the next Planning Commission meeting. And they've actually also hired a new associate planner who will be starting at the end of June. And I think she will be the one who's doing the majority of the land development project management. And then I'm actually phasing out at the county right now. I'm around through the end of this week and a little bit next week to kind of help hand things over to the new director. And my number one priority is really handing things off in a smooth way. I've been lucky enough to work with Mary Hoffine the last few months, and she has that same goal. We've gotten a lot accomplished in the last few months, and I think we're doing our best to hand things off in an organized way to the new staff, and also to wrap up as many projects as we can. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been a really great experience working for Grand County and being on the Planning Commission beforehand. But just pursuing a different thing right now. So I want to thank you guys all for being really good to work with.
Abby, I'd just like to say that I think you have done an outstanding job picking up the pieces from kind of a broken organization, and giving us really good advice, and putting together some really good packets and great minutes, and we're going to miss you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think Mary Hoffine too has done amazing work, and I'm really proud of all of the projects that we've been able to get. A lot of the projects that have been, big and complicated and kind of drawn out, we've gotten to a point where they're almost, they're in their final stages, and so that really has been I'm very proud of the work we've done on that. But thank you very much. So.
Abby, I've respected all of your work when I wasn't on the commission, working with you on the commission, and now working with you and staff while on the commission. And I just want to say thank you for all of your service, and best of luck and come back and speak at our Citizens to be Heard sometime. Come see us.
Especially when meetings are in person.
Right, yes.
Hybrid, I think we'll probably always have an element of being able to join remotely, just because that's so convenient a lot of the time. But anyway,
it's changing.
Do any planning commissioners have any other future considerations or things they'd like noted?
Well, this actually does bring up a question I have, which is, do you know from the county if there are discussions around in-person meetings? I will go to Mallory if you don't know, but I'm just wondering, or Trish, you might know what the plan is.
Yeah, Mallory or Trish, if you guys know anything, I haven't heard anything specific to the county. I know the county commission's office has like a lot of things they're working on right now. So
Mallory, do you know? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I kind of know. We are looking at the potential of going to hybrid meetings, but I know some folks have already been trying that, and it's really hard for the participants on Zoom to hear. So what we're doing right now is looking into the technology to figure out how to set that up. Personally, I think that it provides more access to the public to have the hybrid option. And so it's something I hope that will continue. But right now we're staying just with Zoom, but know that it is in the works to get things set up so that we can explore the hybrid.
I recommend that this body take one second look at our bylaws in anticipation of a hybrid model, just to make sure that we don't run into any confusion. It's something we normally do at the start of the year, but just given who knows what the next 6 months are going to look like, I think it'd be nice to take a look at it. We don't need to make it a formal agenda item, but if everyone could just take a breeze through it, and if you have any thoughts, raise it in the next future considerations, and then we can decide how to pick that up from there. That'd be great. Fabulous. Go ahead, Garish.
I've got one. For the last year, I spent my COVID year building a cabin in Colorado, and I intend to make it my legal residence at some point in time. But I don't have a certificate of occupancy yet, and so I don't really live there. But if you know anyone who is interested in applying to the Planning Commission, you might start talking it up, because my days are numbered.
Well, I am sad to hear that, Garish. But thank you for the heads up. And when you have a better sense of timing, I think just we'll try and get as much headway as we can to ramp up applications and reduce that transition. But I hope you also come back and visit us.
Thank you. When Terry Morse resigned from the county council, he gave, because he moved outside of his district, he gave plenty of notice, and I thought that was really good. So I'm doing the same thing. Not that recruitment would start yet, but just to get the word out, because we've got a really great planning commission, and I think we need to, try to encourage anybody who's interested in applying for my seat once it's vacated.
I agree. Well,
all the work you've done for Grand County, Garish. You've really made very meaningful contributions on the many years you've been on the Planning Commission.
Well, thank you, Abby.
Absolutely. Hear, hear. Well, last note, I guess, with that in mind, is we do talk about sort of where the body is headed. So we have a new planning director and new staff coming into the planning department. We are, as the county is currently assessing priorities, including the general plan update, which I am eager to hear more from as the county administrator and the county commission determine a path forward there. But what this means is the priorities that we had talked about earlier in the year that sort of took the back burner due to staff changes are ideally things we start to take up again. So we have the Spanish Valley survey, which now that we are going to get ready to get that out into the public, I'd really love to aim to get that circulating no later than the week after our next meeting, so that we can begin to get that input from the community as soon as possible. I also know that it's been a few months since we've revisited our priorities, and I realize there's still going to be a little flex bringing in new staff, but if you could all just plan on coming to our next meeting armed with just sort of revisiting those and any additional thoughts that you've had since, I would really like to see the Planning Commission continue to take, I should say, an assertive role in looking at the future of this community. Steve raised some really good thoughts around priorities earlier in the year about making sure we're reaching out to the business community. There's some really interesting work happening in economic diversification that I'm excited to bring updates back to as that moves forward. There's some large scale planning that we're interested in, as well as some small scale issues such as water hardening and water sustainability that Obi and Garish and Josie were starting to look at. I'd love an update on. So let's maybe plan on spending some time next week in that first half, solidifying the survey, And then using that first hour to make sure that we're aligned on priorities moving forward. It's a little bit of sort of, spending the time to save the time and to make the time worthwhile going forward. So I will ask everyone just to prep some thoughts there. Rick, I know that you're a newer member of the body, so if you'd like any updates, feel free to connect or email me or Abby for those updates. And let's turn the corner into June. Holy cow, with our hats on. So, all right. Any final words?
We do need a motion to adjourn.
I'm ready for it. I've been sanctioned for not following Robert's rules. So if there's a motion to adjourn.
I'd like to move we adjourn.
Moved by OB, seconded by. Seconded by Steve. All in favor. Okay, I see those in favor. Garish? Garish is absent. Okay, lovely. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
I'm in favor, absolutely.
Okay, let the record show.
Sorry, I missed part of the meeting.